we are losing control of leading in healthcare because big business creeped in, and they did it very slowly. And they basically took over the strings. It's horrible to say because it makes it like we're weak, but they took over the strings of our being marionettes. And that's how I envision it all, is they took advantage of our altruism and our kindness. And I'm sick and tired of it, quite honestly.
Paging Dr. Cook. Paging Dr. Cook. Dr. Cook, you're wanted in the OR. Dr. Cook, you're wanted in the OR.
Welcome to the Prescription for Success podcast with your host, Dr. Randy Cook.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Prescription for Success podcast, a production of MD Coaches, a company dedicated to putting healthcare professionals back in charge of healthcare delivery by coaching, mentoring, and supporting physicians at all stages of their career. You can find MD Coaches on the web at mymdcoaches.com. Before we get into the show today, I have a quick message for you from MR Insurance, a small business that helps physicians with their disability insurance needs. Michael L. Relvas is a CFP professional and insurance agent committed to helping physicians nationwide with their term life and disability insurance needs. He provides an objective, transparent, and education-focused process that helps physicians make prudent decisions and avoid over-complicating things. He exclusively offers own occupation disability insurance policies for residents, fellows, and attending physicians. We know he'd be happy to help you with whatever your insurance needs are. You can find Michael at drpodcastnetwork.com/MR Insurance, or just contact him directly at 800-817-4522. Well, my guest today is a board-certified internist with 14 years in practice. In that time, she has evolved into a digital healthcare expert and founded a company called SoMeDocs, which is an online platform with all kinds of digital resources for empowering physicians. So now let's hear Dr. Dana Corriel tell her story of success. And it's my pleasure to be speaking today with Dr. Dana Corriel, physician and entrepreneur. Looking very much forward to this conversation because I've followed your work on the internet, Dana. So welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Randy, for having me on. I am not only thrilled, but we just had a little intro that nobody's really privy to, and you made me excited to be here. So thank you for inviting me on.
Well, I'm delighted to hear that because we want everybody to be excited. So what we're going to do, Dana, is, as Alice was advised in Wonderland, we're going to start at the beginning. So let's talk about your beginnings. I know you live up in or at least I think you do, in the New York metropolitan statistical area, as they say. Has that always been home for you?
Absolutely not. But you are right. I live in the tri-state. I live in Jersey, right on the border of New York City. But no, I've actually moved around a lot as a child. I was born overseas in Israel. I moved to the U.S. at the age of 10. And I actually grew up from then on in the West Coast in a suburb of Los Angeles.
Wow. So you have been around.
Absolutely. And we moved around a lot, even within the Los Angeles suburb. We lived actually in the East Coast for 3 months when we first moved. So I've not always been here. I wound up here because I ended up marrying a New Yorker. And so we decided to land here. Yeah.
And the reason for all this traveling when you were young, I gather this must have had something to do with job responsibilities for your parents or not?
Good question. Not really. My father was born in Romania under the communist regime and of Ceausescu, and he had a really fairly difficult childhood and just always dreamed of doing better, and living in a place like America, right, is just a dream for immigrants, for people
Hmm.
that grow up without the freedoms that we sometimes take for granted. So that was the nature of having moved. He first moved to Israel. He had to wait all the years to do it the right way as well. And so he waited for 4 years to be able to move to Israel. And then from there, after marrying my mother and having me, it took many years to get approval to come over. And yes, through his job, he came here, but it was just to sort of provide the American dream for me, his only daughter.
Sounds like he did a pretty good job of it.
I appreciate it so much.
And I think it rubbed off on you a good bit. Do you think so? Do you think all that travel and moving around influenced the person that you've become? Surely it must have.
Wow. I mean, so on point, so astute. What a statement to make. Absolutely. The person I am today, I think, is for sure the result of my childhood experiences and being an immigrant, being hungry. And I don't mean that in the literal sense. I wasn't hungry for food. My parents took care of me, but I grew up hungry to do something with myself. And the interesting part of my life is that I don't really even think that I understood what I was hungry to create and what I was capable of doing until the last few years.
Well, that's interesting, and we're going to talk some more about that. Another thing that I'm really interested in with all the traveling that you did when you were young, I haven't heard anything in what you've said so far to make me think that that was stressful. Did you really enjoy that? And was it difficult, starting new schools and making new friends and that sort of thing? How did that work out?
It wasn't easy at all. So, it's interesting you just said that you didn't hear stressful. I think I'm just a very optimistic person. And I think that being hungry and moving around and sort of having not a smooth childhood, right? Having a
Yeah.
bumpy childhood makes me someone that looks at the glass half full because I almost had to. So it wasn't easy at all. Stories stand out to me of not fitting in and of being left out and of having to, be pulled out for ESL and going into a new school and standing in. My mom, even to this day, reminds me of stories where she looked on in horror as I was always the outsider. And it wasn't because I was odd or anything was wrong with me. It's just because I was the newbie, or I didn't
The new
necessarily
girl. Yeah.
exactly know the language or even fit in, right, to the culture and traditions that are accepted in America, where I didn't grow up with the same icons and things like that.
That's really interesting. And clearly you were more than adept at making the adjustment. That's really interesting.
It's interesting you say that. I don't know that at the time I was able to make the adjustment because I did struggle. I had an inner struggle with not fitting in. But believe it or not, now that I think about it, it's almost that not fitting in that makes me successful today, because it's almost like I don't care. I mean, I do
Yeah.
to some degree, like I'm a physician and clearly I got here with some conformity needs, right? Because you need to somehow be conforming to make it to be a physician, a medical
You
doctor.
bet.
But at the same time, what makes me stand out right now is that I refuse to groupthink. And I want to lead by example because I'm sort of allowing myself to step out of that conformity box.
And you do that very well. That comes across in your work, which we're going to talk about in some detail. But before we get into what you're doing right now, I'd like to know the whole story of how you got interested in medicine and what it was like getting into medical school.
Ooh, there's so many stories to tell. Bottom line is, I was always a person that wanted to do good, wanted to heal, loved human connection. I mean, to a fault. And yes, astutely, you pointed out that my younger experience shaped me. This is true in this case as well. I was an only child and I grew up moving around a lot. And so I do think that to some degree, loneliness is a factor here. I mean, my parents were amazing. I grew up, with them supporting me. I remember playing board games with them, which sounds so odd to some people. But again, it's growing up as immigrants cannot really truly be understood by many unless you kind of live in my shoes. So loneliness sort of contributed to, I think, my love of people and my just wanting to connect on so many levels, and probably also contribute today to my being so open-minded to every single human in this world and also every single story, even people that say things I don't agree with or people that say things that could be interpreted as hateful. To me, it's always about, I don't know, like putting myself in someone else's shoes and accounting for factors that we don't see on the outside. And ironically enough, right, I deal with social media, being a social media expert now. And that to me is one of the negatives of social media, is that you just don't see the full picture of someone when they say something, and sort of everyone sometimes just piles up. So that's shaped me into who I am today.
And at about what age were you when you decided that medicine was going to be the thing? And where did you go to undergraduate school? What's that story?
I don't remember the turning point where I decided to really do it, but I can tell you that in all honesty, that as a child of immigrants, it was so important for my parents that I do something that was important with my life. And I think that it's just a natural thing for not only immigrant families, but just, I think, families in general to want their kids to, quote, be successful. What do you think of the traditional, like, doctor or lawyer? So I think that was sort of ingrained in me from a young age.
They want you to have a better life than they did.
100%. Almost, I don't know if living vicariously through me is fair, because it's not that they were necessarily overbearing, but in a way, they did want me to have more than what they had. But fasting forward to where I am today, I can tell you that they have been some of the, and surprisingly, some of the most supportive people in my life in my transition out of clinical medicine and in starting something that was so completely new and innovative that most people didn't even understand what it means. Like, to have my parents, who all my life sort of envisioned me as a doctor and were like so thrilled when I completed that, say to me, they believe in me, is just the most amazing thing in the world. And to go back to your question, I went to UCLA for undergraduate. And that too, by the way, was also just sort of the thing to do. Like, you just went to a good school, and it was sort of the result of my parents wanting me still somewhat close to them, being an immigrant and being an only child. So coming out of high school, I only applied to a handful of universities. And I remember I made it into Berkeley and really thought of going there, but really my parents would prefer that I stay close by. And so I chose UCLA. It was a great school. I thought I'd have a great education, and it just turned out to be fine and great.
And were you thinking of medicine at the time that when you entered UCLA, or did that happen later?
Interesting. That was actually my path, was pre-med. But what was interesting was I had a little blip in college where, as a result of, I think, being alone for the first time in my life and away from my parents, felt free to some degree, and almost to an extreme, because I had done so well in life until then. And I suddenly sort of felt the exhilarating nature of being without oversight. And I think I went the other way and went the other extreme, where I sort of did not pay enough attention to my studies, was like having so much fun going out with people that I was meeting, right? It's that human connection that suddenly almost overwhelmed me.
I'm shocked. I've never heard about that from a college kid.
I know, right?
I think it's so normal.
It is, exactly. And listen, like, I didn't even do anything crazy. Like, I didn't experiment with drugs and I didn't party hardy too much. But at the same time, for me, that was an extreme, was that my grades suffered a bit during that time. I was experimenting with being a rebel, in that you don't always get A's,
Sure.
right? And
Yeah.
so, yeah, there was a blip where I was like, first of all, my grades weren't up to par and to get into medical school. And secondly, I was like, wait, is medicine really my calling, or is there some other calling that I just had never experimented with before? And the story ends in that I just kind of, decided through circumstances of my personal life that medicine was right for me. And I think part of that was that at the time I had a boyfriend in college that was he was in medical school at the time. So he was on a path to being a doctor. And so I think that shaped me because I spent a lot of time with him and he was very serious. And it sort of brought me back on track to being more focused on my studying. And I actually, going into junior year of my college life, I took the bull by the horns and I actually started doing really well and put myself back on track to becoming a physician.
Remember medical school? You were confident, studious, hardworking, and you learned what to expect in all manner of patient care. Then reality struck. Regulations, expenses, staff management, and administration. Is this what we signed up for? Stress on the verge of burnout, no time for family, or the reason we got into medicine. Helping people. What are the options when you're afraid you're in the wrong career? Transition, teach, quit? What if there was another way? MD Coaches can help. We're a team of medical professionals with a century of experience in the clinical and business sides of medicine. More importantly, MD Coaches has been where you are, stressed and trying to navigate a world school didn't prepare us for. MD Coaches is your mentor, your confidant, to help you make your practice shine, navigate administrations, and successfully lead staff and projects. Or if you're ready to transition, we can help there too. MD Coaches is doctors helping doctors. Visit our website to receive a free, no-obligation consultation. Go to mymdcoaches.com/RX. That's mymdcoaches.com/RX. Isn't it time someone else was on your side? Don't let the business of being a doctor stop you from doing what you love. That site again, mymdcoaches.com/RX. Visit us today.
We'll get back to our interview in just a moment, but right now I want to tell you a little bit about Physician Outlook. If you haven't discovered this remarkable magazine, please do so very soon. It was created by physicians for physicians to showcase the intersection between clinical and non-clinical interests, whether it's writing, painting, cooking, politics, and dozens of other topics. Physician Outlook gives a physician perspective. It's available online and in print. It's really unique among physician lifestyle magazines. And like the Prescription for Success podcast, Physician Outlook amplifies the voice of any physician who has something to say. It also engages patients who still believe in physician-led, team-based care. And Prescription for Success listeners can get 3 months free when you enter our promo code RX for Success and select the monthly option at checkout. That's a really great deal on this stunning publication. And now let's get back to today's interview. Did you stay at UCLA or where did you go to medical school, I guess is the right question.
Great question. No, I did not stay at UCLA because I did not immediately get into the, traditional schools in the US. What happened was I didn't get into the schools. I didn't have the greatest GPA going into junior year, at which point I really did well. So the plan was to just work on my grades, get an MPH. In the meantime, I got accepted to the UCLA MPH program, but I don't know, something happened and I came across a brochure about Sackler, which is an American medical school in Israel. And it seemed like such an interesting life journey. And again, it was me exploring and experimenting and pushing my limits. And so I interviewed, not thinking anything of it. And then the acceptance letter came. And my mom always tells the story because she loves it. I woke up one morning in tears and I called her and I, in tears, through the tears, said to her, I'm going. I am going to Israel to study medicine. And it was the turning point in my life because it, again, involved me moving to a completely different country. And again, a country I had grown in. And
you had roots there. I got to think that must have felt like it might have been preordained.
It felt amazing. And the 4 years that I experienced afterwards in medical school were incredible. To this day, I think back on it and just think of all the amazing experiences I had while learning medicine, including meeting my husband, who's a physician as well.
I don't interview many people that say that medical school was the most glorious time of their life. Not that they wish that they hadn't done it, but it's quite a struggle. And for you, it sounds like it was really much more than that. And that's a good thing to hear. And so postgraduate training, I gather that happened in the U.S.?
Yes, I did my training in residency at Albert Einstein Montefiore in the Bronx.
Yeah, good place to be.
Sure.
And what was that like? Once you got there, once you were really a physician, and once you were in contact with sick people every day, did you think, yeah, this is exactly where I belong, or was there some hesitancy? Tell me what that experience was like.
I mean, I think the best word to sum up what it was like would be just one simple word: hard. And I'm sure I'm sure that all the physicians listening can recall their days of training and residency. It is hard. I mean, for so many reasons. You're working for very little money. You come out of med school in debt, heavily in debt. You've have so many missed opportunities only to come into a space where you're in charge of people's lives. You feel so unprepared because you're in charge of people's lives and you're judged to some degree. I know it's harsh to say that because I do so appreciate my training residency program, but it is really hard because it is so competitive to become a doctor. And even when we're training to be a physician, it adds to our stress to know that people are judging us. And so it was extremely hard for me. I mean, I didn't train in the United States. I was plopped into a residency program. I also additionally, through a fault of my own, because I decided to get married early and we did become pregnant actually during my intern year. So I added to the difficulty of this period by introducing a baby to the whole picture. So yeah, it's a hard time because you're up many, many hours. You're up days in a row and you're making decisions that need to be right because people's lives are in your hands. So the simple word to describe that time period, it's hard for me to even recall a lot of it because it was again, so much was on my plate, but one word comes to mind and that's hard.
Yeah, I think a lot of people overlook the dual pressure and you have described it beautifully. You're there to learn, you're taking care of sick people, you have big responsibilities, and yet all the while you realize that you're being judged and that your very future depends on it. It is indeed a great deal of pressure, and I like the way you describe it.
Yeah, and I don't think we have time to go into the stories that I could share at one point, maybe in my own accounts, but circumstances for me added to that judgment, little things like the fact that at that point in time, I was still a pretty, I don't know, I don't want to say aggressive. Aggressive is not a good term, but I didn't fight for my rights. And I've grown into someone who's learned to sort of stand up for myself and what I deserve. And what I mean is, for example, being on call at night on the first month of being on service, of going into my internship year. And for example, not having the resident who was working on my team with me, having a different resident that was working with his or her own team. And I remember that set me up for failure to some degree. But you don't speak up when you're in that position because A, you're not, quote, supposed to, and B, you're supposed to do this. And you also don't know what your rights are and what is going to set you up for failure, et cetera. So it was little things like this that in hindsight, I realized made me not be the best that I could be. But again, maybe that's me judging myself harshly. So,
and you say not the best that you could be in what way?
I don't know. That's such a good question. I don't know. I think it's just me being harsh on myself because whatever I accomplished during residency was clearly sufficient for me to be a good doctor in the real life setting, because I've had great experiences out in the real world taking care of patients. And, at the point that I left medicine a year and a half ago, I was really clicking with patients. I think maybe that's what it is that I was referring to, is that I think I didn't quite learn how to bond with patients during the time of training. And maybe that's a result of all the pressures that we have on us that I was able to accomplish being a seasoned attending. And it's a shame because that's the part that to me translates into me making a difference in patient lives, is that connection that I discovered I needed to make with my patients. So
It's a very good point, and very eloquently stated, I might add. It's very interesting. So, and you've alluded to what happened after residency. Did you stay on the faculty at Einstein?
I didn't. I took a position at Mount Sinai in the city at the World Trade Center Medical Monitoring and Treatment Program, which was in and of itself extremely interesting. And I was there for about a 5-year period.
And when you finally stood in those shoes of a completely finished physician, not only a physician, but a teacher of physician, a supervisor of physician wannabes, how did that feel?
Great question, because it didn't feel as it should, meaning I was so used to being on the bottom of the food chain that it took me,
Oh my goodness.
right? It took me
Literally.
many years. Yeah, literally. It took me many years to grow into that role of being a leader, where now in my role in SoMeDocs and in the business that I'm creating, I'm trying to essentially empower physicians. But I see from a 30,000-foot view just how much we have been beaten down and how difficult it is for us, ironically, to step into the shoes of being a leader. Because each and every one of us, medical doctors, DOs, who have earned our medical degrees, can and should be a leader in healthcare. But for many reasons that we can, of course, touch on in terms of the woes of healthcare, we're not.
Well, that's a really fabulous segue. You're really helping me move this program along here, because I find it very interesting that in spite of the fact that you were clearly a good physician and clearly making a difference and in a very stable position professionally, you decided that you would leave what you were trained for and go start a new company in the midst of a worldwide pandemic. So you want to tell us how that came about?
Of course, I do. I just want to throw one correction in there, is that I actually resigned. I put in my resignation in the summer of, I believe it was 2019. I don't remember now, but it was 6 months before the pandemic.
I see.
Yeah, so it wasn't during the pandemic. I actually think that if I was going to leave during the pandemic, I would have had a harder time just because of things like guilt.
I bet.
Although, we're a dual physician family, so I'm not sure it would have actually been very easy to be two physicians leaving a household where I couldn't have contact with other people that could take care of my kids. So, and people who have done it, amazing, like kudos to them. But I actually left before the pandemic. I left for so many reasons, but I just couldn't practice in the setting of the way that healthcare is run today, in an organized setting of working for an organization, which was what I had bandwidth for. Like, I didn't have bandwidth to leave and to start my own practice. So I, for a while, worked for the big guy, right? For the corporation, for the hospital system. I couldn't stay. And it was because of the nature of the beast. It's not just the organization that's at fault for my leaving. It's also the insurance companies, and it's the EHR systems. And it's basically me not being able to fully connect with the patient as I should be.
I'm fascinated that you recognized that. In the era when I began practicing medicine, it was the polar opposite. And we found that our therapeutic space was gradually eroded by the slow but inexorable insertion of big business into healthcare. I think we kind of gradually became more and more dissatisfied. In your beginnings, I think the big business was already there, but you seem to have understood that there was something not right about that. Am I misreading you?
You're so on point. In fact, I'm actually, as we speak, I'm literally scrolling through, and I don't think I'm going to find it, but I'm scrolling through a Facebook post I posted yesterday in a physician group where I literally dissect this concept and explain to the other doctors that we are losing control of leading in healthcare because big business creeped in, and they did it very slowly. And they basically took over the strings. It's horrible to say because it makes it like we're weak, but they took over the strings of our being marionettes. And that's how I envision it all, is they took advantage of our altruism and our kindness. And I'm sick and tired of it, quite honestly.
Boy, I think that's going to be the intro to this show. We usually have a quote that we put out there, alone all by itself, and that is just perfect. I'm sick of it.
Yeah, I am. And I think what makes me unique in my commitment to the physicians out there is that I'm willing to put my mouth where my money is and sort of do it in many ways, but to give physicians the tools they need to start building up their worth, to start giving physicians project in which we can claim back our leadership space in medicine. Because at the end of the day, we need to do this in order to take back the healthcare relationship and to have the public truly understand why it impacts them for us to not be the leaders. Because that's the problem that I'm seeing here from a 30,000-foot view, is that everyone sort of looks at us as rich whiners. It's almost like the second we step into attendinghood, we are somehow privileged and we are no longer allowed to feel stress or upset or feel like change needs to be made or to feel like we need to advocate for ourselves. But it's going to impact public health. And that to me is concerning.
Well, I certainly recognize and am sympathetic with that feeling of emptiness. I think we've all felt it at one time or another if we're in clinical medicine at all. But at the time that you decided to step away, did you already have the beginning notions of what would become SoMeDocs, or did that develop after you had a time to separate yourself and take some time to think about what should be next?
Absolutely not. I knew what I was doing. I had taken the 5 years before that, or 6 or 7 or 8. Actually, this will be an interesting chat to talk about. I had taken a 3-year break from medicine when my third son was born. And that, I think, is truly where my fire was lit, at least where skills were concerned. Because I think my story begins with recognizing that I have these skills that are not very common for doctors to have. And also sort of foreshadowing how I could put those skills to use and reading the room in terms of how society was communicating and influencing each other, and that healthcare was missing in that space. So it was almost like a formula for me 5, 6, 7 years ago to put together my future. And I remember to this day waking up one morning because my husband, he's a cardiologist, he did not understand what I was doing, and saying to him, I will one day do something big. Like, I'm telling you that I get what's wrong with a picture. I'm not sure how I'm going to impact it positively, but I'm telling you right now that I'm going to build something big because I know what's wrong and I know how I need to change it.
It sounds like if you build it, they will come.
I always use that phrase. I love it.
I expect a lot of people that are hearing the show are already familiar with SoMeDocs, but a lot of people won't be. Why don't you go ahead and tell us what exactly is SoMeDocs and why should they be interested?
Absolutely. And the caveat to what I'm about to say is just that it's still evolving, and it actually is constantly evolving. And I think us as physicians, we're not used to that. And so I have people that give sideways glances about SoMeDocs because it's, quote, always changing. And yet in entrepreneurship, it's like a given that your business is going to constantly change because you're constantly trying to optimize it and make a fit based on the needs of your target audience. And so the crux of SoMeDocs is that it's a space that builds resources for doctors to grow online, to build their personal, their worth online, digitally. So I have a physician audience where we have various resources. We have Facebook groups. We have a public-facing social media account that together has 40,000 followers where I can showcase the doctors and their work. We build websites. We have SEO optimization. We have course creation and hosting. But we also have that second arm to SoMeDocs, which is the public being our target audience as well, because it's not enough for me to teach the doctors how to do it, to give them the space to build the project. Now it's about bringing in the rest of the world and saying, hey, come over here and look at my innovators, these ridiculously talented and intelligent doctors. Let's start to follow them because they've got incredible work behind them. They build podcasts and they they have websites in which they regularly write, and they create stories and publish books, and they speak at your speaking gig. And so I'm a connector, essentially. I am trying to convince the rest of the world that doctors are so much more than just going to a practice and seeing them behind closed doors. Doctors are actually talented and we can do more.
It really is a brilliant idea, I think. And again, I have the advantage of a 44-year career behind me, and I can see much better, I think, what perhaps needs to be fixed. But in the old days, if you will, the only people that we really had to impress with ourselves was other doctors. I mean, we had to be nice to the patients and do the things that you do to build a good practice. But most of our exposure came in professional meetings where we talked to each other about the science of medicine. And it appears to me now that things have changed by the intrusion of big business, that we have no choice but to show the public exactly what we do and how we do it, and why we are a good fit for them. And I think what you've done is really a brilliant way to do that. Is that more or less what your vision was, or am I missing the whole picture?
You're getting it completely. I also, just like you just said, I see us in silos. I saw us in silos in the past. Now, we broke down those silos to some degree when we sort of took on Facebook and said, wait. This whole social media thing is so much more than just social. It's also media. It's a way to actually connect, right? In real time, you can have a conversation, whether it's written or verbal, with other doctors from other parts of the country. We never did that before, except when we went to conferences and things like that. But even then, there was an agenda. Now, I took it a step further because what happened to me was that I joined existing Facebook groups, right? Because these groups are communities where you can get together with other like-minded doctors or throw out creative ideas to like build up voices. But what I found was that even within the physician groups that were created, and this was years back, I was stifled. Like, the groups were being run with the admin in mind. Like, it wasn't a fair for everybody. And kudos to them. They were growing it entrepreneurially. But to me, you're kind of stuck in the same place because now you're sort of still working in a business kind of thing, and it has to like conform to what the admin wants, and you have to like give them money or an affiliate to say certain things, or they view you as competition a lot of times. So at some point, I didn't want to do this at the time. I honestly just wanted to use existing Facebook groups because it takes a full-time job to run a Facebook group, but I couldn't take it anymore. And I said, I am just going to literally start from scratch and build the foundation of a Facebook group that is meant to empower physicians, but then also give them the tools with which to network so that all of us can build up and feel free and feel good about sharing not only our viewpoints, but also our work and what we do. And that's sort of the basis of how SoMeDocs was birthed.
So if you were going to tell a physician why they should investigate SoMeDocs and find out what it has to offer, what would be your pitch?
I would honestly say that I first of all, that it's fueled by the passion you're hearing. And secondly, because you're looking at someone that truly loves humans and loves both physicians and members of the public and is extremely open-minded, but is trying to come up with the most feasible solutions for getting physicians together and activated so that we solve this healthcare problem. Now, it's not easy. It's not easy, especially in 2021, because it's almost like we're too connected. All of us are made up so differently, and all of us have so many different viewpoints. And unfortunately, social media is not encouraging of that, does not like warmly hug that about us. It actually wants us to group think. And if we're not group thinking, then we're bad people. And I'm so worried about our society being that way, because how else are we going to innovate if not thinking outside the box and having some differences of opinions? And so I'm trying to constantly evolve and build SoMeDocs in a way that sort of opens up to everybody and everyone's experience and viewpoints. So that's why I always use the word facilitated networking, in that I want to put out prompts out there and then get everybody, like in the comments of a Facebook group, to share their stuff, whether you agree with it or not. And I need help. And that's where I am today, is that I finally recognize that, right? Because I'm never going to succeed if I build this free Facebook group that already takes up my full-time job and needs people leading, helping me to lead, that understand that everyone should be welcomed and that it needs to be facilitated. That's where I am right now, is sort of looking for more leaders, because the space has grown quite nicely. We have close to 5,000 people in our physician-only Facebook group. We've also got a public Facebook group where I'm hoping to then take the doctors who are being innovative and creating and let the world know that they're doing it. And then again, additionally, working those social media platforms of SoMeDocs, which have over 40,000 followers, but I just can't keep up with the demand.
Sure. And I'd like to give you an opportunity, and I think it's very important to make the point that this is not just another Facebook space where people are making snarky comments and posting strange emojis and that sort of thing. SoMeDocs is actually totally separate space where physicians can find information and motivation and inspiration that is aimed directly at them, and a place to directly connect with people that are in the same boat, that have the same problems, that are trying to get over the same hurdles. Am I saying it correctly?
So well. In fact, that's, I think, what makes us truly stand out from others out there who, by the way, are wonderful, and every space has its own purpose. But the difference in SoMeDocs, and actually to my detriment, because I do think sometimes that physicians feel stifled in a space that is curated like SoMeDocs. The reason I say curated is because we started it by honestly just allowing people to share their work. But at some point where you get to a certain size, right, it doesn't add to a value of the group to just have people randomly sharing their blog posts or their podcasts, right? There needs to be organization so that a group like SoMeDocs, a member of the group, someone who comes in, can just kind of find the niche and their interest, right? And so right now what I'm trying to do is, like I said, facilitate with prompts. You want to figure out how to podcast, or some of the secrets of podcasting, or maybe just who has a podcast out there and what is the latest in their podcast episode. Great. Search for the hashtag podcasting and you can find it. Likewise, writers. There's a ton of physician authors who are like, how can I get my book out there? There's speakers out there who are like, I have an important message. How can I get connected to businesses? Well, you use the hashtag speaking. And now I'm going to slowly bring in physician leaders that can help spark that discussion so that we learn how to better speak and that we know where to get gigs. And then what SoMeDocs does additionally that's different than anyone else I've seen is that I've muscled my way online. I've built us a website from scratch myself that showcases our voices, that categorizes our voices first based on our specialty, and then recognizing that we're more than just our specialty. We're also what we do on the side. We're speakers, we're podcasters, we're writers. The development of these new departments in SoMeDocs, where I'd like everybody to have a page and showcase what makes them stand out. And then eventually whoever lands on it, whether they're doctors or the rest of the world, can sort of search through these categories to find what interests them.
Well, Donna, you've really created something unique and I think has the potential to provide some much needed assistance for physicians who are trying to make their practices not only more financially successful, but more personally successful and spiritually successful, if you will. And I can't say big enough congratulations on coming up with the idea and making it happen. It really is brilliant.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
Well, we have come to the part of the show that is absolutely my favorite, and that is where I get out of the way. And so what I'm going to do now is close my mic and listen quietly, and Dr. Donna Corriel will give us her personal prescriptions for success.
I appreciate that. I actually made a list of points, and the reason why I'm going to just keep it to the points is because, as you could tell, I could speak for hours, and I just don't have that time here in the podcast. So my points were the following. My prescription for success is don't be afraid to tap into your skills. Listen to your gut. Focus on those who love you and love them hard. Allow them to refuel you when you hit low. Take a step back on your life plans regularly. Reassess. There's nothing wrong with reassessment and frequently. And there's also nothing wrong with adjustment. Along those lines, don't allow others to steer you in a different direction. Listen to what others have to say. Soak some of their suggestions in, but don't be afraid to go with your gut, to do your own thing. Push past your comfort zone if you want life adventure. This is especially true to physicians out there because we so follow a trajectory, but this is our time to shine, to innovate, to think outside the box and do things that we were otherwise afraid to do in the past. And finally, my final point, keep an open mind, accept others, and give them the benefit of the doubt.
Dr. Donna Corriel, thank you so much for being on the show today and sharing your story and also your prescriptions for success, which are really right on point. No surprise to me. Before we go, I want to give you an opportunity to let the audience know where you can be found. So tell us about the website, the Facebook site, email addresses, or anything else you'd like to share.
Absolutely. So I have two digital brands that I'm growing. The first, as we mentioned, is my business, and that's SoMeDocs. It stands for Doctors on Social Media. You can find us at SoMeDocs.com or using the handle SoMeDocs, SoMeDocs, across social media. And by reaching out to us at our business email, SoMeDocs@SoMeDocs.com. And then additionally, something I have much less time for is my own personal brand. And that's me and my life and my ideas and my consulting abilities and skills. And that's Dr. Corriel, spelled DrCorriel. I'm found at drcorriel.com and also across social media using the handle Dr. Corriel. So thank you so very much, Randy.
Well, thank you again for being here. It's been a delightful conversation, and I appreciate you taking the time to be with us. I know you have a very busy schedule, so it's a pleasure to have you. And I'm really fascinated. This is just the beginning of SoMeDocs. Maybe if I'm still podcasting in another 3 or 4 years, we'll have you back, and we'll talk about what a great success it is. What do you think?
I love it. We say in my culture, from your mouth to God's ear. So that's what I have to say.
All right. Well, let's let it be that way. Thanks again, Dr. Donna Corriel. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much, Randy. I appreciate it.
Well, thanks again, everyone, for joining me today for my conversation with Dr. Dana Corriel. Before we go, please don't forget to reach out to MR Insurance Consultants, where their goal is to assist physicians in obtaining the most comprehensive coverage available to fit their unique situation. Reach out for both excellent and quality service at drpodcastnetwork.com/MR Insurance. And that's all we have for this episode of Prescription for Success. Our theme music is created and performed by Ryan Jones. Remember to follow us at Apple Podcasts or your favorite download platform. And also remember, it helps us a lot when you leave a review and a 5-star rating. Also, we hope you'll visit our website and leave your prescription for success using SpeakPipe. Finally, don't forget to fill your prescription for success with my next episode.